It's one thing for Meta and Zuckerberg to have it.
1,000 needles that all have different data points attached to them, and then bringing that together in a mesh.
Then we can also analyze what the causes of the crime were and maybe prevent crime.
There's some history around predictive policing. That's a dark side.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is October 3rd, 2024. You're listening and watching the Daily AI Show Live, and today we're getting into crime solving. Can AI be the next best crime solver? Can it find Kaiser Soze? We're going to find out on this show today. And with us, we have a lot. We have a lot of us today. It's nice. We have Junmi, Beth, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And yeah, this is a fun one. This is a good conversation to talk about because it gets into AI and data analytics and where AI can do a really, really good job. And honestly, we're going to be talking about a product called Soze, which we hope was named after Kaiser Soze. They pronounce it the same way. It's spelled the same way. But the idea here is this is not a revolutionary tool. This is simply using AI to dig into data, which is something AI and machine learning have been doing for many, many years now. But still very interesting what's coming out of Australia with this particular product called Soze. So let's kind of get into that a little bit. I think, Beth, were you the one that suggested this, or did somebody else come up with this one?
This was Karl.
Karl. Okay, well, let's start with you, Karl. What caught your eye on this particular news story out of Australia, and if you want to give a little more background to it?
Yeah. So the background here is that I did my undergrad in criminology, and the ideal path that I was planning to go on to was being a federal prosecutor, and just took a different turn completely. But took my LSATs, ready to go to law school, accepted to University of Victoria Law, UBC Law, and I'm like, was literally just picking which law school to go to. And then something happened, a co-op job happened, something different, and then just led me on a completely different path. But I still have a lot of I just remember all the classes and what it was. So, and again, like as any criminologist, big Law and Order fan, like all the cop shows, all that, just that gravitates toward that. But what really got me this is that's part of it. But I thought, wow, what an interesting use of AI in a field we don't normally talk about. We talk about deepfakes. We talk about things that the criminal element could use to commit crimes, but we haven't talked very much about how to combat that using AI. So I thought this was really neat, where in Australia, they could use AI to do 81 years of detective work in just 30 hours. And so the tool, Soze, which again, that's part of it's like, when I saw this, I'm like, usual suspects? Whatever. But then everyone's like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So the Soze tool can analyze video footage, financial transactions, social media, emails, and other documents simultaneously. So for example, if a detective, like a cold case, they have to go through a lot of data. Like that's literally what they have to go through. The crime scene investigation, all the things related to the case, they have to go through it and analyze it and see if there's linkages and things that they do to solve the case. So it said that an evaluation showed it was able to review the evidential material in 27 complex cases in 30 hours, which is estimated would have taken 81 years for a human to do so. And this isn't new. AI can take a lot of data, analyze it faster than humans can at ridiculous speeds. So the Gavin Stevens, chair of the Australian National Police Chiefs Council, said that this technology could help close some of the country's oldest and most notorious unsolved cases. So it'd just be really interesting to see police services and law enforcement agencies be able to use AI to, take all the data that's being collected, because a lot of that would be police work, collecting all the data that you get from crime scenes from everywhere, and then either make recommendations, predictions, or make you further along than a human could do. And so I thought that was just a really interesting way to do it. And obviously, but it said here that the police chiefs recognize the pace of implementation. And there's a couple of things that we probably see in businesses as well. Change management, making sure that people are comfortable with this. Because I could just imagine some detectives who have been working, or police officers been working for decades, they could see this as a threat too. It's like, wait a minute, this AI could process information faster, make recommendations. And if these recommendations, as it gets better, is within 70, 80, 90% accurate, what am I doing? What am I doing here? So, and obviously that's not feasible, but it's just more of like, so I like what he says at the end here. This isn't handing our responsibilities to technology, but what the technology is helping us do better. And that's what we've seen from all the cases. It's not replacing people with tech,
right,
but it's helping people become better. So if detectives be able to use this, they can process it faster than what it would have taken them weeks, days, months, years.
This is a recurring theme, right? I mean, we like you just said, Karl, exactly what I was just going to say is like, this is not replacing detectives. This is taking the boring, repetitive, like not fun work, which is, let's say in this particular case, one of them pouring through 3,000, or I think he even says in his video, the guy that created Soze, a small data set, a small case is what he said, might have 300,000 images or something, or 30,000 images. I have to look back and see what it is. That's small. That's tiny. He often said that a normal case would produce as a digital footprint over 100 terabytes of information. And even that's not considered to be the upper echelon of it. That's a significant amount of data. And really where the problem comes is, as he was saying in the video, it's not lack of data, it's too much data, right? Look, what do you do with this? And so if we take this back to the business use case, this is exactly the same thing businesses deal with all the time. It's not lack of data, it's a lot of data. What do you do when you get a deluge of data coming in? How do you sort through it and decide what is actually valuable and what's not? And oftentimes, at least when I was in data analytics, what we were doing for companies was we were not just looking at any one particular database. That's going to get you some far, but it's not going to get you as far as when you're able to connect in data lakes, warehouses, stuff like that, and get disparate data sets that were once isolated from everything else, now playing nice with the rest of the data, because now these new insights come up. For a human to do that is, as they were pointing out, is hundreds, if not thousands of years of man and woman hours to do that. So what I love about this, but what I love about all AI solutions in this particular niche of data analytics is it's actually allowing detectives to do detective work, which is go out and get me the data and all the things that might be interesting really, really quickly. So we'll get into ethics here and data privacy in a second, because that is a huge part of this. But let's just say for a second that they had access to the data. So we're talking about, cameras on street corners and maybe Tesla video and obviously text messages and cell towers, all that data. And it's all being put together. And let's just assume in Australia, they're able to very quickly put this digital footprint together and get a sense of geolocating of where this particular suspect or suspects might be. Now the detectives can go do detective work. They can say, based on my knowledge of this area, maybe working this geographical area in this city for 30 years, I can push that data, that one recommendation, I can immediately put off to the side and say that doesn't make sense based on what I know and my knowledge of the city. But these other four, those are actually pretty good leads. And there's no way we would have gotten these as fast as we did. So now I can put actual people on those assessments. It's very cool, but you have to take a giant leap past the privacy side of it and who has access and who's allowed to have access to all this data.
Because it's no longer, and this is where the lines are blurred, right? Because you already have people worried that big tech companies have your data and collecting your data. But now you give law enforcement the ability to collect your data. It's one thing for Meta and Zuckerberg to have it. It's another thing for some people. For me, I'm like, have all my data, but for other people, be like, wait a minute, you mean like the Calgary Police Services now can track me everywhere, anytime? Like, and that's not necessarily you are a criminal. It's more of like, hey, I kind of don't want like government to be able to track what I'm doing, and essentially law enforcement is an extension of that. So these are the things that, we have to start being aware of. And I remember the controversy about iPhones, Apple being able to give like the FBI access. Right. How do you unlock the phone? Like, can Apple give you like a jailbreak, a law enforcement to do that? But then slippery slope there. Well, same thing here. Like, if we think about it, we got reasoning, we got agents. Imagine a police service with agents. I want you to do this. And we all talk about Minority Report, but forget all that kind of tech. It's just like, I want you to predict the outcome based on, historical patterns where crime is most likely to happen in this area. And then imagine that become like, that's already public, but like crime will happen there in the future in the next 5 years. You know what will happen to property value? Oh, my neighborhood is going to have criminal activity in the next 5 years. It's going to tank. Oh crap, I got to move out. Like, there's implications, and I don't know if that's even a relevant example, but like there's implications to that type of predictive analytics. And that's where you have
there's some history around predictive policing. That's a dark side. In fact, one of the earliest examples of predictive policing is from a Santa Cruz-based company called Predpol. Then it's changed its name to avoid the brand, damage that occurred as a result of a host of different things published about the biases that are obvious in trying to make predictions about where crime will happen based on where crime has happened. Again, I just did a quick search about Predpol predictive policing on Google, and listen to some of the headlines. Public furor about predictive policing program ends LAPD's use of it. From MIT, predictive policing algorithms are racist. They need to be ended. Now, they're still in use. They have it on a micro scale, the possibility of saying, well, and if we're going to have patrols, the patrol ought to know that this particular intersection, has a higher probability. So you probably want to, manage your patrol car routing so that it goes through that intersection more frequently than other intersections. But just taking the gross thing of saying, okay, let's put all of our patrols in this neighborhood, there's a lot of danger associated with that. Now, that's one class of applications of ML and AI in law enforcement. We started out talking about crime analysis and investigation, and there's a bunch of others. We talk about face recognition and overall surveillance, which can be very useful in that. But let's stick with crime analysis and investigation for just another moment, and just say that there are a bunch of other products other than Soze that do this, including Palantir. CrimeScan is another one that does predictive policing, but also can be used to analyze crime data in a data analytics kind of way. And IBM has enterprise insight analysis that is being used by law enforcement for that kind of thing. And what I wanted to share is, in my mind, you see on the TV and on movies where the crime investigators have a big board and they have pictures of everybody up there, and they have
murder board.
Yeah, and they have strings that they're trying to tie. Okay, this person knows this person, so I'm going to put a piece of yarn between those two. Well, that's bygone era in the era of AI, because AI has the capacity to understand all of those edges and connections between all of the entities that it can identify in the data. So it basically designs a graph that delivers all of those strings of yarn and creates clusters that say these people have an association that might not be obvious. Now, my experience with this very superficially goes back to the year 2000, when while I was at In-Q-Tel, we made an investment in a company called Systems Research and Development, which had a product called NORA for non-obvious relationship analysis that was used subsequently in the post-September 11 analysis of terrorist cells to determine, based on huge information collection that's done by the intelligence services, what are the connections here? What are the things that are not so obvious that link people that would otherwise on the surface not get a piece of yarn from one to the other? So data and big data analysis and relationship analysis like that, which is also a foundation of social networking, by the way, like what are the human social relationship networks in LinkedIn, like who's a friend of who, friends of friends, and all of that has arrived at a day in time now where AI can encompass those things and give us the possibility of being able to ask questions in the crime analysis and investigation context, like, here's a hypothesis. This person did it. Tell me why that's not probable. And the language interaction between an investigator and an AI about that is going to rapidly advance the ability to close off as dead ends many hypotheses and circle in on the ones that are the most prevalent.
We talked about this in the context of biology, right? And discovering proteins or antibiotics or those sorts of things. It's essentially the same kind of idea. It's running the possibilities, right? Running like all of the crazy possibilities, all of the not crazy, but all of the permutations, right? Like match them all up, and then now that we've done that, these are where you should do it. And I'm just going to go for the pun because why not? We are moving from monkey fingers now to gumshoes, right? That's what you said. So they're not going to use their monkey fingers. They're going to use their gumshoes that lets them actually detect as detectives.
And go out and get additional evidence. Yeah. So there's a whole area of AI application in law enforcement, which is evidence management with body camera information now coming in. Like, the chain of custody of the evidence that's developed by the Axon body cameras is a really carefully and legally important process, because lots of data, lots of evidence cannot be admissible in a court unless its chain of custody has been carefully protected. And so there's a whole science behind how to take images like that and keep them clean without tampering. And you've heard in the news about, that officer turned off his body camera for 15 seconds in the process. Well, that makes that inadmissible, right? The rest of the data is inadmissible as a result of the tampering with that evidence. And by the way, it's a friend of mine who developed that Axon body camera system in the company Taser. Taser was the company that developed it. He's the person who developed the strategy for doing that and actually implemented the development of that Axon body system.
That's really cool. I wanted to bring up a point here that because I looked this up using Perplexity, I'm going to say I assume it's relatively correct for the discussion, which is cold cases. Now, this Soze is being deployed in Australia, and one of the things that came up in Perplexity as I was doing research, I think Beth, you had shared some research on this for the show, was, hey, what would be opportunities of deploying something like this in the U.S.? Well, there's a lot of complications, a lot of hurdles to jump over to do that. One of the reasons I read was because in Australia, it might be a lot more centrally run as far as police force and stuff. There might be a lot more, like, as we would see, a more federal involvement all the way down to local. That's not really the way it's done in the States. And I mean, in my lifetime, since I've been driving, it just got to the point where Florida was sharing driving records with Georgia. Like, we want to think that everybody's sharing everybody's data, but that could not be farther from the truth. Not only is it because of protection of this department might want to hold the data and not want to share with others. Every single show is about nobody wants to share with the FBI. The FBI doesn't want to share. Like every show, like, plot is based around like, I don't want to share my data with you. We're going to take care of this. This is our scene, that kind of crap. So you have that. But like when you really look at the numbers, Perplexity is saying that there's total in the US, but this is overall time. So of course this number is growing every year, between 250 and 300,000 unsolved cold cases. They add about 6,000 a year. So just think about the implications of what this would do for loved ones, for people who just don't know what happened to their loved ones because they disappeared because their car drove off of a bridge and they're submerged. I mean, this happens a lot, unfortunately, or enough in Florida, where late at night with nobody around on a side road, the car veers over and it's submerged underwater, and in an instant it's just gone. Because we have lakes everywhere. We have retaining ponds literally everywhere around this state. It's like Swiss cheese. So just being able to use that digital footprint and being able to track in certain pieces and parts, and it's not just about in the video the inventor or the founder said, everyone is to say it's a needle in a haystack. It's the smoking gun. It's the the fingerprints were in fact on the side of the water bottle, and now we know who our suspect is, right? That's every show, but that's not life. That's not how it really works. And Karl, maybe you saw a lot of this as you were going through your initial training, getting ready to go into that field. He was saying in the video, this is like getting 1,000 needles that all have different data points attached to them, and then bringing that together in a mesh that, like you were saying, Beth, allows, hopefully the idea allows the law enforcement to come up with ideas, concepts, leads that may lead to what happened. I find that like this is such a huge hurdle that I actually don't see this happening in the United States, like maybe in my lifetime. Like I actually think it's that big of a thing, just because I think about all the regulatory hurdles that would have to be cleared, and the fact that we don't really have our system set up like that. I'm speaking just for the United States, obviously. I love this idea, but the idea of data being freely shared is really just something that I think we started to see in the last 10 years or so. And I think a lot of departments and a lot of places in the United States simply don't want to do that for their own preservation, maybe for their own job preservation, whatever. There's fear among that. And then you just layer on top of that everything that goes with data privacy, and whether, like you were just saying about the body cams, whether that data would even be, admissible because of 1,000 other regulatory hurdles in law and stuff like that. So I don't know about you guys. I love this idea, but also at the same time, I feel like there's zero shot of this working.
I do feel all it will take to me is not maybe major metropolitan areas like the LAPD or the New York police or Vancouver police or wherever, like big. I'm talking like maybe local municipal, like local county law enforcement. Let's say that someone's like maybe doesn't have the amount of regulations that like a bigger city would have, and be like, you know what? It takes one or two people to be like, hey, let's connect this with this, and let's just bring it all together and see what happens. And to me, it would just spark something simple. It's like, wait a minute, this county has been, their clear rate for cold cases, I don't know, what would that be, is 30% or 40% higher than anything else. Let's study what they're doing. And I think that's like, and yeah, it will take time. It's like, oh, that's what you're doing. Well, that won't work in here, but if we adapt it this way, maybe we can take 30, 40% of it. And so to me, yeah, that will take a little bit of time, but it's the ability to connect all the pieces, like forensic evidence, cybercrime evidence taken from the crime scene, evidence from like all the things we talked about at the beginning, and really being able to put it together faster than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Because that takes like, there's reasons by like task force are created. It's like, oh, we need this person, this person, this person. There's a lot of people because you have to go and collect a lot of things. Like take the body cam camera. How many hours of thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of footage? Probably no one, that'd be like one of the worst jobs, just sitting there forwarding. imagine an AI can just scrub it, and like it's looking for very specific things, like a license plate that starts with whatever it is. That in itself, again, we always talk about the 10 to 40% productivity and efficiency. Yeah, if it can save me 40% having to sit here and look through all this stuff, then that resource could be deployed doing something else. So I thought like that's a really, really simple way to start. But I do maybe want to pivot, maybe have a fun conversation about what I talked about earlier about like, so there's the propensities higher for AI-enabled crimes, right? Deepfakes, cyber attacks, phishing attacks, like more so. So what do you think ways that AI could combat AI-enabled crimes? Because I was thinking it's like, okay, how would you prevent voice cloning? Like, how would you prevent financial fraud? How would you combat like, deepfakes? Like, what could AI do to combat that? So it'd be interesting. It could be another cat and mouse games like deepfake for criminals, law enforcement, deepfake detector. Not sure if that'll work because of the education just doesn't work. But how? Like, I'd love to know your thoughts. Like, how, if you have any thoughts on how this would actually work.
So I like that idea, and actually I want to tie it back to what we were originally talking about, which is if we can detect where crime is going to happen, if we can predict where crime is going to happen or where it happened, then we can also analyze what the causes of the crime were and maybe prevent crime, right? Crime happens often as a means to a specific end, right? So you steal something because the baby needs diapers or whatever that is. If you are collecting data and can have that analyzed, like maybe this is something my city would do. Maybe there's like a diaper drive, right? Like, okay, cool. If you need diaper and formula and everything is like going kerflooey, this is the resource to go to, right? And how much would that be in terms of prevention? And so also, Karl, for you, I think that AI then starts to tell the story of if this were fake, why would it have been faked, right? Who would benefit from this as opposed to so the story of whether this is a deep fake or not from the actual tech that is used to do it, but the story behind it for why it had been done, and are there crumbs for that? Is there data for that?
I think the answer is more data, not less. And what I mean by that is, if you have AI that's, let's say, altering, Karl, like a video or an image from a street corner because they digitally changed the license plate or something, then the answer to that with AI is more data that proves from different angles that was tampered with. It's almost like using a blockchain, which by the way, I think blockchain technology is also part of this solution. So things are verified through the blockchain so that they can't be tampered with, or it would be very hard to tamper with them because it'd be a chain of where the actual original source was. The really simple example was back when we had the hurricane last week, right around this time. Last week, Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel, if you're in the States, then you know who he is. He's sort of like the guy that shows up. If he's in your town, he's like, watch out, right? Well, he was in my town. He was in Newport Richey, where I live. And there was a picture of him that my mother-in-law shared with me. And she's like, oh, he's at this local place. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's a real image. Now, they had superimposed the beer on his hand. But even that, I figured, okay, fine. They might have just put, like, it was a cartoon beer. It wasn't like they were trying to make it. This local company was having fun. And I was like, yeah, no, it's like 95 degrees out and he's got like a heavy jacket on. I would have to see this from a different angle. There was other people at the bar. So let somebody else with an arm around him. That to me would prove that this wasn't digitally enhanced, but I was pretty sure. And the text back was like, no, he's worn that jacket everywhere. And I kind of let it go. Because I thought there's no way, and I never saw that from a different angle, but I just assumed like if I was the AI side of this, if I'm AI, I would be like, okay, well, it's social media. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got a camera. What other angle is of Jim Cantori standing in this location or somewhere similar because then I could like sort of triangulate and validate that information that it wasn't a tampered piece of evidence. So I don't know. I guess my initial thought is blockchain, yes, but also more angles, more pieces to disprove the stuff that people are claiming is fake. So more AI to fight AI. One of the things I can pull up on here that's kind of fun using AI as part of this conversation is, Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM, which we talked about plenty on this show at this point. It's still getting lots of love. Matt Wolf just did a great video about it. But there was a whole white paper done by the company that makes Soze. And I was like, I don't want to read the white paper. And I was like, I'll just do a summary with Perplexity. And I was like, nope, I'm going to do one better. I'm going to actually create a quick audio podcast out of it. So I just have it teed up here really quick because I thought it was a pretty cool answer. And I have the tab shared, so you guys should be able to hear this. Let's go ahead and play this super quick.
Okay, so picture this right. You've got a detective. They're trying to crack a case, and they have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of photos from a crime scene.
I can't even imagine going through all of it.
Right. A human would be stuck doing that for who knows how long. But Soze, it can analyze literally millions of images in no time. And it's looking for things like faces, objects. It can even pick out clothing.
Wait, millions of photos. Seriously, how does it do that?
So they use something called computer vision, which is basically a way to teach computers to see and understand images.
So the computer is basically doing the detective work.
Kind of, yeah. It's wild. And get this, let's say it spots, the suspect's car in one of those photos. It can then cross-reference that car with other databases, traffic cameras, license plate records, even social media to figure out where that car's been.
So it can track movements, put together timelines, all that stuff.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. But I thought it was a nice little clip there was a nice little summary of how it's intended to work. My brother does work for one of the major cellular companies, communication companies. And for a while, he worked in the fraud department, essentially. So he worked hand in hand with detectives all the time. And it's important to know, if they wanted access to the company that my brother works for, somebody's records, they had to request that. There had to be a legal procedure for that data to be taken. It's just not like you can't just get whatever you want whenever you want it. Apple, whatever. There's reasons why they want to protect their clients or companies' data, right? For the people who are using customer data. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. Yes, it makes sense. Thousands, cross-referencing, multiple data points, multiple needles in a haystack. But again, unless there's some sort of directive or whatever that says this is legal, I think it's just going to run into a lot of issues. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in these. I think it was 2 different towns in Australia that were just trialing this to see. I would imagine they're continuing to do their regular old detective work and using this as an adjunct on the side to see if it helps them speed up. And obviously they have some use cases where you were talking about, Karl, where it has already made a difference. And there's quotes from the police chief and stuff like that saying that, we like it, it's working, that kind of thing. So it'd be interesting to see where this goes. But as you pointed out, Andy, certainly not the only company involved in this field. So it'd be really interesting to see where it goes from here, especially as AI gets better at multimodal, as it gets better at reading video faster. We know Google can already do that. I mean, we can play with that at this point. We can give it audio and video and have it scrub it and look for certain pieces, but that's all going to speed up and it's going to get a lot cheaper. I mean, that we kind of know. So that also is going to make sure that it's available to more of these smaller, maybe locally run, police forces or whatever, like you're saying, Karl, that they don't have millions of dollars to implement something like this. But if the AI costs go down so low that it becomes reasonable for them to run it on a local budget, then yeah, you may be right. Maybe this is something that you start seeing a lot of smaller departments use.
And speaking to what you're saying about see where this goes, so the follow-up stories using Soze is actually coming out of the UK as well. So they tested that, or they announced that last week that they were using it in the UK, and potentially. So the UK is an interesting place for this to expand into, because they are a highly monitored nation, right? They've got the most CCTV cameras in the whole world. I think it's almost on like every corner of the streets. But so they're definitely going to have a larger information base to work off of this. But I think one of the things we got to make sure that we keep an eye on is how, beyond just implementation, but what's the value of the tool itself? I mean, not to diverge too far into the predictive analysis side of things, but does the value from what they've said so far is it can go through like the 10,000 images, right? Because a person would take forever to go through those 10,000 images. So being able to pull out those elements and things like that seems valuable to me, right? To help the investigator with information that allows them to draw their own conclusions to their investigation, that makes sense to me. Relying on the AI to make determinations, I want to make sure it doesn't go down that route. Provide me, if you say this has a high percentage of likelihood, why is it, right? We're seeing the reasoning coming out of like O1 and other models. So show me the steps. You taking this data piece and this data piece and this data piece, and you're making the conclusion that this is happening at this high percentage. That makes sense to me because you're showing me every single step. You're showing me all of the relevant information. And then there should be a component in there where I'm like verifying, or I'm coming into, it's like, what other piece of data that could be relevant, and this is where it gets into that whole connection cloud idea again, to bring out those conclusions or those ideas that, or those iterations that you're kind of filtering through. Oh, maybe there's a different angle here, right? Because there's, multiple angles on any conclusion. So this gives the investigator more ability, more access to being able to make all those determinations. That's where I think the power of this and the value of this kind of technology lies, is just to empower your investigator a little more, right? And the fact that they're really applying this to cold cases is, I think, probably the ideal situation. I don't really necessarily want to see this in active cases, or at least not this kind of implementation, because, the problem
if my daughter disappears, I sure as hell want it being done in an active case. I want it being done immediately using all rules and all laws, and I want all the data.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from. What I'm talking about is, having all the information available so that can be solved. Yes, I agree with that. Being able to go into the predictive side, saying, "Hey, we're gonna do our resources," and those kinds of things being put into certain areas, maybe not necessarily, right? Yeah. That's the angle I'm going there. Now, so like I was saying with the cold cases, I think that's a great test bed for how this could be properly brought into criminal investigations, right? And I really like what Beth was saying about why don't we can use this information set, we can use these data points to help solve the source of why X crime is being created or being done, right? Because crime, for the most part, is a symptom of a larger issue, right? There's always outliers, of course, but for the most part, most crime is because it's a symptom of something. So if we can solve those larger issues, then we will inadvertently solve those criminal issues or the reasons for them.
And then you have more resources for the crimes that aren't the symptom of those things that are easy to solve, relatively easy. Karl, check your mic, because there's some funkiness.
It's just muted. Well, listen, I want to, while Karl's doing that really quick, while you get that fixed real quick, I do want to bring in Jen's comment, and I'll tell you why here in a second, because I'm going to share my screen. So Jen is in the comments. By the way, always thank you to everybody in the comments. Jen said, being able to track people shouldn't be an open source capability. Okay, here's the next thing Jen said. Sure, but I have safety concerns if that's the case. Obviously, talking about what we were talking about a few minutes ago. I think there needs to be monitored in a big way. I think about people being found by jilted lovers is one example. Nope. And then this is the main one. Hopefully, it would be fiscally out of reach for individuals. Jen, it's not. And so I want to bring up this story that literally came out yesterday. It's a bit of a news story, but it is in line. I do want to bring this up as just an example. So some students out of Harvard University just used Meta glasses. So we know the Meta glasses that look, well, there's a picture of it on the screen. They look like Ray-Ban sunglasses. And so what they did, you want to talk about scary and talk about being readily available. They basically were taking images and video that were coming from their glasses of other people that were in their field of view. It was going off and scraping through this data, coming up and finding personalized data on the people, names, addresses, kids, you name it, whatever you can find on the internet. We don't have to go about that. And then feeding it back to the glasses. And they actually had a demonstration. Now, these students are doing it to demonstrate the safety concerns, right? They're not doing it to break laws, but they were even showing it on like a train or something like that, where they started conversations with somebody near them using their name to make it seem very much like they know who these people are because they had already been processed the data. And of course, the person sitting across from them would have no idea that that data was being processed in real time about them and what they look like, where they just came from. We're going to talk about some scary stuff. So like Jen, when you're like, yeah, hopefully, these types of tools, the Clearview and these other big companies out there that are scraping all of the data. Here's a quick use case of how people quite literally did this in the last week. It's scary. It's scary. And I'm with you. I mean, Jen said, sorry, I'm looking for it. She said, because for me, like anything else, we just pray it's used for good in society. I'm with you. We pray there's more students like Harvard who go, hey, you can jailbreak this. Let me show you. This is important. I can break your thing. We see that all the time with code hackers that are for good. But just as quickly, we know that these things are going to be used for bad as well. Karl, were you able to get your mic working? No. It came up like we don't have your mic anymore on there. Okay. Well, I do want to get Karl's, but Karl, we could always get your point on this tomorrow because tomorrow is our 2-week recap show.
Or record a video, right? Like we'll post it maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna be, like I said, if you're gonna be tomorrow, we're gonna be talking about the last 9 shows anyway.
Oh yes.
So we could certainly
also come tomorrow.
Yeah. So this is one of these conversations that's it's like a onion. You just keep peeling layers back and you go, okay, well, what about this? Or like we started getting into maybe the predictive, probably a totally different show on the predictive, the Minority Report side of it. Today was more about like cold cases and using it to solve crime, not necessarily that most likely has already happened. And how do we put all the data and digital footprints together in order to solve the crime? I think a lot of it is too, just as we wrap up, is it's education for the public, because frankly, I think the public, probably in most countries, think it's like what they see on TV. And for my small part in the world of being a firefighter and being on the EMS side of things and knowing what that looks like just from that very, very narrow view, I can tell you that those shows just drive me nuts. I know they're there for entertainment value, but man, I wish people didn't think that's the way it was really done, because I think it actually hurts us. They think there's all these magic wands in the world that are just smoking guns, and boom, by the end of the show, this person's, they're caught, and as we can see with 250 to 300,000 cold cases in the United States alone in just one country, right? We can see that that's obviously not the way it really works. So I think a lot of education on this is necessary for the public so they can really understand how this is actually done. So anyway, any last thoughts on that before we wrap up, guys? Okay. So like I said, tomorrow we have the 2-week recap show. It's where we take a quick pause. We look back at the last 9 shows, this one included. But we talked a lot about OpenAI and different things they have coming out. They've even since Wednesday, they've had some other sort of interesting news stories, come out, and we can sort of talk about that and what's what's real and what's just, guesses at this point, as well as all the other topics that came up since last Monday. So come on back tomorrow. I always love this show. I always say that, but it's one of my favorite conversations because you just never really know exactly where it's going to go. That's what makes it fun to me. It's a little less boxed in. And don't forget this, you can always go to thedailyiShow.com and you can sign up for, not only can you see the rest of our shows, figure out where to subscribe to us. Likes and subscribes go a very long way. I know you hear that on every single podcast and all that, but the reality is it's true. We can see the data on the backside, and it does make a difference. So if you like this show, if you've come to a few of our shows and you like this, a subscribe means that somebody else is going to see this show, and it's going to help us grow. And of course, you could also sign up for the Daily AI Show newsletter. It goes out every Sunday. I'm currently working on this week's version, and I'm personally proud of it. So I think you guys should take a look at it. It's totally free, and we're not spamming anybody or anything like that. It's literally just to give you guys more than we can give you on these live shows. So that's it for today, guys. We will see you again tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get Karl's mic working, and we'll get those last thoughts. We'll start with that tomorrow, Karl, if you can join, and we'll go from there. So that's it for today, guys. Have a great Thursday, and we will see you. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Oh.